Welcome into the second edition of the Minnesota High School Football Network podcast. I'm here with Quinn with 612 Qs. How are you doing this week?
I'm good, man. How are you? Crazy week.
Yeah, right. Now we'll get into it, and we'll also preview some of the matchups that we have in week 4. Right? Week 4.
Week 4. Yep.
Week
Already.
4. So we're gonna review week 3. We're not gonna get to all of the games. We'll get into just a few kind of not the top games, but just some of the ones that I got to go to, you got to go to, and that we got to watch. But should we dig into the last Thursday? It feels like so long ago already. But last Thursday we had the big game of the night, which was Edina Minnetonka. We had Prior Lake lose to Eden Prairie 40-13. Eden Prairie kind of got back on track last Thursday. Shakopee stayed undefeated against Wayzata with a 17-7 win. And let's dig into this Minnetonka Edina game. Minnetonka kind of stunned Edina, or I guess the fans too. I was there watching it, and a lot of people were live streaming it. What were your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I didn't get to go to that game. And I initially turned on the live stream on my TV, and it was 21-7, 21-0,
Yep,
21-7. Edina was up.
21-7.
I saw West connect with Swinney for a bomb or a post or something. I was like, I turned it off, watched Thursday Night Football. I was like, this one, I'll check in later. And I was checking social media, Twitter, Instagram, all the stuff. And all of a sudden, it's 21-14, 21-21. And then I see the pooch kick. I don't know when that happened in
Yeah.
the order of operations, but I see the pooch kick, and that's when I tuned back in. And that was it was unbelievable. I should say effort by Minnetonka. It seemed like once again, I mentioned Coach Lombo last weekend, just a great of a defensive coach he is. It seems like they had a great game plan. The best way to beat Edina is probably by keeping the ball out of their hands. And it seemed like Edina and Mesa West and company didn't really have a chance in the second half to really get that high-powered offense going, which I think was kind of a snowball effect and got the momentum back on Minnetonka's side in the second half.
Yeah, we talked about Caleb Francois earlier, like previewing that game, and I think that showed up. It took a while for him. I mean, the whole offense in Minnetonka didn't really have a good showing in the first half. And again, some of that's them probably not playing well, and some of that's how good Edina is. And it was 28-7 at one point, and then
Okay.
you could start to feel the comeback, and then the 2 fumbles that you were mentioning. I think the kickoff fumble, or like the pooch kick that kind of happened, that got mishandled, was when Minnetonka was down 7, and then Caleb Francois goes down,
Yeah.
scores to tie it, and then I think it might have been the first or second play after that kickoff that there was a fumble, and
Yeah.
Minnetonka recovered it. They got it basically already in the red zone with the short field, and took the game with they had like that reverse pass too. I don't know if that was for
Oh, yeah.
I think that was to tie it. That was to tie it because they needed to
That was
go
a
for 2.
crazy throw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
For
man,
whoever that
what a game.
whoever that was, for a non-quarterback, for whoever that was, they held it to the last second, really
Right.
surveyed the whole, like, that was a great play because
Yeah.
usually receivers, when they run the reverse passes, they are either quick to tuck and run or they're quick to, throw it away, but he really, like, extended the play and really let it develop, which is actually pretty cool.
Took some guts to call that play, to
For
tie it up,
sure.
just because, that's one of those plays that if it doesn't work, everybody's like, "Why did you run that? That was the
Yeah.
dumbest play ever." But if it works, it's like brilliant, So it's one of those
Yeah.
things where coaching, it's kind of a lose, lose, lose whatever you do, but that was a win. They did not lose any of that.
Yeah.
They came back. Trillian Sorrell had a really good game. I think he had the opening touchdown. I think it was like 80 yards or something. Or actually, I think that was the second one. He had 2. One was on the goal line, like a slant that he took away
Oh,
from
yeah.
one of the
Saw that.
Minnetonka defenders. That was a crazy catch as well. Just the strength that he showed on that one. But yeah, going and like, I was thinking of like driving home from this game, like what my takeaways were. And it was like, it's a tough game to take away just because like each team kind of owned a half. So when you're like looking back on it, it's really hard to tell who's the better team because Minnetonka won. But I would say the first half was more dominant of a showing from Edina than Minnetonka had in the second half, just because it was more of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Capitalize, just
Capitalize. There you go.
yeah, for
On the
sure.
and not a lot of teams are probably good enough to capitalize on those mistakes.
Yeah,
Just because, a lot of teams, Edina can kind of make some mistakes and
yeah,
live with it just because they probably are the better team. But in that case, Minnetonka showed out in a very impressive win.
yeah,
Tuesday, kind of making a statement to the rest of 6A that they're there as well at the top
yeah,
echelon. So that was cool to see.
for sure.
Moving on to the Friday slate of games, we had a lot of decent games. One of the biggest ones was the Battle of the Cats, the Lakeville North and South matchup. This one happening at Lakeville South. Lakeville South losing 35-31. The Panthers coming up victorious. What are your thoughts on this one?
First of all, I want to say, that was all the games I've been to this year and maybe even last year. That was the best overall quarterback. Looking at from the quarterback perspective again, that was the best quarterback play I've seen head to head in a matchup. And probably the last 2 years, I've been really traveling to games between Riley Grossman and Gavin Dean. They were making throws when their team needed it. Gavin was throwing; he was rolling left, throwing posts back across his body on 3rd and 15. Riley hit a 98-yard fade. That receiver, by the way, for Lakeville North, I've never heard of him before, but he is very good. Number 2, I don't really know his
Forest
name
Green?
even, but yeah, he's really good. He was impressive. Just the throws that were made when their team needed it the most, which is what we try to always preach with the stuff we do. Really trying to who's like what kind of like it's easy to be a good QB on 1st and 10. What kind of QB are you on 3rd and 8? They're blitzing 3rd and 15. Everybody in the whole stadium knows you're throwing, and the throws that were made were really impressive. So want to give a shout out to both those guys. And just the environment of that game felt like just a college
Crazy.
atmosphere. There were so many people there. I
Yeah.
got there at 6 o'clock. Barely got a seat still on the lake on the south side. I like to sit by the press box, and it was so hard to get a seat. So that was definitely a fun environment, a cool place to play a high school football game. The whole town there, like I talked about last week, that game just means more, and you could just feel it. Like even the pregame warm up, you could feel a little bit of tension. You could feel the kind of the hostile environment building up. It was super cool. But
Yeah,
the game
I
itself,
usually get there like an hour before just speaking on like the environment, and usually I can like walk in, like and go do my like pregame shooting, but I was like, is this line going like the line was going to the school and there was just like a ton of people. I was like, oh my gosh, but carry on.
yeah, that was yeah. Game itself, kind of I was talking to my buddy who came with me, and it was kind of a game. I feel like it was a game of quarters, not necessarily a game of halves, game of quarters. I thought Lakeville North put a quick stranglehold on South. They scored early right away, first drive. Um, they had ball on South's 40. I'm not sure if they had a good kick return right away to open it up, but they had the ball in pretty good territory to start. I think they scored first 3 plays. Riley
I
hit
think yeah, it was a
number
bad
2.
punt, and I think it was the
Okay.
first 3 plays. It was
Yes, South
he
got the
it was
ball
like
first.
that curl that Grossman threw out
Yeah,
to the right side
right.
and took it to the house right away. And
Yeah.
if there's one thing that like Lakeville South and the teams that run a lot, they really don't want to find themselves like behind, especially really quick in a game.
Mhm.
So it was kind of interesting to see how they were gonna like battle out of that.
Yeah, and touching on what I talked about last week, both of the teams are running teams. They primary, Lakeville South's going to stay in the power T. Lakeville North prefers to stay with that dive back or in the I formation. But as we saw, both teams, if they need to throw, they can throw because both guys are capable, and they do have the athletes on the edge to make it happen. So I think that shows both teams kind of they can pound it, they can get 7 yards of carry, 6 yards of carry, but they can spread it out if needed. And both teams had to. So it was cool to see, kind of, because we talked about it last week.
Yeah, I think Riplinger, or
Yeah.
I hopefully I'm saying that right. I was looking at like the touches, and I think he is one of the most or the most carries in the state, just like talking to your point of them running the football. But I thought it's kind of interesting that you said it wasn't halves, but it was quarters. And that kind of goes to what I was thinking is kind of like a different version of the Edina Minnetonka game structure wise. Like one team kind of took over, and then it was kind of just like it wasn't both teams at their best, but it was like one team and then this team. It was just like back and forth in that way. I mean, I think it
Yep.
was interesting to say the least. And like you were talking about, really good quarterback play from I missed the what was it, a 97-yard touchdown from they had a really good punt at the start, and you're like, oh boy, here we go. Safety time. This
Yep.
one's gonna be close, and then just a deep fade. It kind of
Yep.
makes a statement for the first quarter, putting them up 14-0. But Lakeville South able to battle back. And man, let's talk about the officiating in this game. Just so it was 14-0 off rip, and then Lakeville South got a touchdown and was driving down before half to go score. They had no timeouts. They are on the 5 or so yard line, and they go run the ball up the middle, and the clock is ticking down, going to triple zeros. And, I think one of the Lakeville North defenders, you see lay down on the running back just so the running back can't get up. It's kind of an unwritten rule. There is a penalty that can be called for it, but not a lot of the time it's called, and defenders are kind of taught to do that.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see that, and they ended up not getting the playoff. Well, they did, but it was a false start. So
Yeah.
usually what would happen in just like football rules is a 10-second runoff would happen, or they would be able to take a timeout so they can run another play. In this instance, Lakeville South didn't have a timeout, so they couldn't stop the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Hypothetically, although that's not what happened, the ref put 1 second left on the clock, and each team kind of got like their own timeout. Lakeville North didn't,
Yeah.
because their coaches were arguing the call, which I commend them for, just because I think they probably shouldn't have got that touchdown at the end of the first half, just because in a lot of
Yeah. That was.
situations the offense wouldn't get another play. I didn't know exactly what happened, what the explanation was behind that. But what are your just impressions of that?
That was a crazy situation. It's a lot going on. Uh, I I try not to be someone who does. I mean, you got to evaluate the refs, of course, but I don't like. I couldn't do their job. Everyone's
Right.
yelling at them. You got this coach yelling at them. You got this coach yelling at them. You got this player
Mhm.
yelling at them. So it's like so much going on, and just like we said at the beginning, just just the tension that was already building up. Lakeville South's kind of making a run again. It's kind of a it's kind of a situation that there's a lot of unwritten rules, and what do we like? How do you? There was just too much going on, so I don't know how to handle that better. Of course, there's probably some things that uh, you know this coach is
That's why
mad
you're not a
about. This
ref.
coach is mad about. That's why,
Right.
yeah, exactly. That's why I'm watching. That's why I'm in the bleachers. So it's like, I don't know. It was a crazy situation, but it evened out. I think throughout the game, calls go each way, every game. That's just kind of how football works. So you just got to live with it and move on.
Right. So they ended up giving them another play, and Dean throws it to Smith in the back of the end zone. Just a huge catch. Like that
Yeah,
was one of the probably catches of the week, going up right over the
yeah,
top of one of the Lakeville North's defensive backs and scoring it, tying the game. And that kind of
yeah,
just set the mood going into uh, the second half of like, all right, this game's probably going to go down to the wire one way or another, but it's just a
yeah,
matter of how it's going to go down. And it did not disappoint. I also would be a fool not to mention Bo Bachman's like 97-yard punt return touchdown. I think it was a school record they
yep,
announced, but Lakeville South didn't have any offense going in that first half, basically.
yeah,
And
Yeah,
he
that was
kind of
huge.
lit a spark underneath the team, and I think without that, they wouldn't even have been close to winning it. But just one play can really flip the script of a whole football game.
Yeah. Yeah, he's, knowing Bo, he's like a spark plug. That's just the kind of kid he is. He brings a lot of energy to everything he does, and I can't believe he stayed in bounds. That's the thing that
Yeah,
shocked
right,
me because I thought
right.
he got pushed out. I thought Riley, because I was
Because
watching Riley, like, is Riley going to tackle this kid? Because I know Bo is a big dude, and I'm
uh-huh,
like, Riley, push him out of bounds or whatever. But he tiptoed right up the Lakeville South sideline. That was awesome. That was,
yeah,
yeah, spark plug play. Just completely shifted the momentum of that quarter for sure, and that
right.
game, kind of the trajectory of it.
And then going into the fourth quarter is really where the action picks up. Sam Ricklinger had a touchdown, but other than that, it was a Lakeville South field goal in the third quarter. But there's 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they all came. It's like bam, 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 and then obviously the last touchdown pass to Hunt for the do for the pylon for the game winner. But just a lot, like you were saying, of elite passing from both quarterbacks. And I
Yeah,
was more impressed from, I don't know, you can just tell, like you said, if they need to throw the ball, that they can. And I
yeah,
think your
for
statement
sure.
from last week kind of just like proved it, during the game.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what's gonna. Um, I don't know. Like, I'm looking at the other. I don't want to talk about their 6A schools, but I feel like these two guys, both Division two commits, in Minnesota, that's impressive to do, as QBs aren't really. It, coaches don't come here to, it's not. I mean, they're going to Texas, they're going to other states to throw the
Right.
ball all the time to come
Right.
get a QB. So it's like to have two guys going head to head at that caliber, with the receivers that they do have. Like, I didn't know Lakeville North had that number two. Even number one was pretty good. And then you got Connor, Jonah, Bo for South. Like, there's some athletes on the edge. So to be able to combine the dynamic run game that they have with the ability to pass, like, it made it for a really entertaining game. I thought really well played game on both sides. It was hard to, it's really hard to have someone lose that game. That's one of those games where you
Right.
just keep playing.
Right.
So
Going into the last drive, Lakeville South kind of scored, and you're like, is this it? And Lakeville North had a chance to kind of like basically the ball in their hands last. Lakeville South did have the ball at the end of the game, but at that time it's kind of just the Hail Mary. But Lakeville North had the ball. I think it was a pretty decent. It started at like the 25 to
mhm.
40-yard line, roughly in there, and Grossman led them all the way down uh, for a touchdown. Let's talk about. We had a social media post about that pass interference call, and that was one of the other there was 2 big officiating moments in this game that, like, I'm not a big officiating person, but whether you're a big officiating person or not, they really had an impact on the outcome of the
Yeah,
game, whether you were on the good side of it or bad side of it. The second to last play that the touchdown was scored on for Lakeville North, there's a interception, and Bachman got called for pass interference on the receiver. And I'm not going to say my opinion on it. There's people that say it was pass interference. There's people that say it wasn't. During the moment, it's going to be really hard to do that as a ref. You see a receiver fall down, and you obviously think it's pass interference. I'm sure if they had reviews or replay that uh,
yeah,
it would be easier to call, but it's just a bang bang play. But that kind of just was a big factor in deciding the game, and I think it was kind of justice served just because Lakeville South had that huge call go for them at the first half. So
yep,
although it was very questionable at the same time, um, it kind of balanced out the calls. So now both teams can be like, you had that call, but the other team can say, oh, you had that call. So in
yeah,
a way, it
yeah,
kind of evens out the scoreboard. And um, the takeaway from this game is that these two teams are going to be competing for the state championship, and they're going to be in the runnings, whether they won it or it was just a fun game to be at. And I bet,
yeah,
the players are going to look back on it and be like, that was just a fun game to play, whether they won or lost it.
yeah, yeah. I think, Lakeville South is 1-2 right now. Tough loss to Izetta, beat Farmington. Tough, really tough loss last week. Yeah, like you said, both teams really impressive to watch. I think they'll only get better as the season goes on, and it'll be fun to see how they finish the year going into playoffs. So
Yeah, South's got a good game coming up against Egan. Egan's
Yeah, tough
underrated this season. They've been
for sure.
doing pretty well after getting beat, I think, the first game by Edina. But let's transition to some of the 5A and 4A matchups that we got. One of the big ones was the Robbinsdale matchup, Cooper versus Armstrong. Armstrong being on the W side of this matchup. Cooper, I think it was 48. Let me check just so I get it right. 49-21 is the final score. What do you got on this one?
Didn't watch, saw highlights. Armstrong's once again another rivalry game. I went to Armstrong. I never played in that because we were 6A and they were 5A when I went there, so I never got to play in the rivalry. But being, I've been to a game since I've graduated, and yeah, it's pretty good atmosphere. You know, there's some tension with those games too. So I think I don't know, Cooper, every year it seems Cooper has just athletes everywhere, like either a gopher commit or, you know, Jackson Howard. Like they seem like they have just athletes running around everywhere. And Armstrong consistently year in and year out is uh just as tough. Maybe not as big as name of athletes you could argue as Cooper. You know, they got the number one recruit in the state with Emmanuel and then Jackson Howard, etc. Armstrong always has a solid team, and they play well at the right times, well coached. Coach Nagan over there, and I work closely with Beckham Van Voorst, who is a new QB at Cooper. He's a 2027 kid. Uh, Been really impressive this year. Had a great game against them, I feel like. Made big throws. Armstrong has a good running back. I don't know his name. I think he has like 12 touchdowns on the season. So
Johnson.
he seems
Yeah,
to be
he's a
he
dog.
seems
He's
to
a
be a
dog.
problem for a bunch of people. He seems to be a problem.
You
So
know he's good when an off game is like, did he have less
yeah,
than 4 touchdowns? It's an off game, you
yeah,
know. Just
right.
it seems like every week has at least 4 touchdowns.
Yeah. So Armstrong seems to be, you know, they seem to be in the conversation for what I think is a pretty wide open 5-way, kind of new school, like new teams coming up through 5A with Chan kind of out of it, West, little different look with 5A. You know, last year you had some big dogs who you knew were going to be at the end of the season. This year, I feel like it's a little more open. So Armstrong could be a team that makes it deeper than most people think.
Yeah, I think they got a good shot, especially we talk about the running teams in Minnesota. Although some, it's
Yeah,
not the fun football to watch for some
yeah,
people. At the end of the day, like when it comes playoff time, like if you have a good running back and a good run game,
hmm
that was kind of our Eden Prairie conversation yesterday. That's why they're always relevant. If you got that
yeah,
and you're going into maybe if you're even outmatched one game, but you can run the ball better, yeah, it got a good shot in the playoffs. So
yeah, for sure. Good
yeah,
defense too. I know they have a linebacker, Pylon. I don't know how to say his last name. I think he's a 2026. I think he's a really big. I think he's a really good linebacker. He's
Cal
young too.
Pylon.
Yeah, he's good.
Island. Apologies if you're listening and your name was mispronunciated. You can DM us or just like whatever. It's in these we don't have pronunciations and it's kind of a lot of names. So cut us some slack uh, in trying to mention names, but we're doing our best. We're doing our best over here. Next game, St. Louis Park versus Apple Valley. Apple Valley lost 28-35. St. Louis Park coming out victorious in this matchup. What do you got in this one?
I got an improved St. Louis Park team. New look at QB Everett Arnold. Uh, Brand new to quarterback. Kind of played a little bit last year, but really dove into it this offseason, and he's starting to pick it up. He's a really big kid. He's like 6'4", 210, can run. Only a sophomore. They seem to be getting on the right page as they're putting up more points each week. So it's cool to see that the development with Everett. And then Apple Valley, you know, going into the year, kind of heard Apple Valley could be through 7-on-7 too, but I don't, you know, people know me, I don't like 7-on-7 or look into it. But I heard a lot about Jackson, who is very talented. I've seen him throw a couple times, very live arm. And then I've met the receiver they have, Q Barnslater, I believe his name is. So they have, like, from my understanding, outside looking in, they have some athletes. It seems like they haven't been able to get any traction yet. Hopefully they can get it going. It's still early in the season, but that was a shocker to me just because St. Louis Park last year struggled, but it seems like they are coming together, and that's cool to see at the same time. Kind of a new team gelling and rising to the occasion every week.
Yeah, that was their first win of the season, so kind of getting back on track. Early in the season, it's hard to judge how good teams are just because you do have those games early in the season where it's like, how do we know if this is a good team or do we know if this is a bad team if they had a tough schedule right off rip and they're struggling, or and some of it just takes time that good teams develop over the course of the season and they get better towards the end of the season, especially in high school football when a lot of the kids you see are rising. Centennial's one team that I can think of, Stillwater another one, where a lot of their receiving core, just whole team graduates, and it's kind of like meshing and just gelling at the start of the season. But St. Louis Park on top, 1-2 going into the rest of the season. Apple Valley looking to bounce back too going into this next game. Rocroi versus Benedild St. Margaret. Hopefully I said that right. That was my one pronunciation that I was just dreading saying. The Red Knights. The Red Knights. I'll just say the Red Knights. 30-20, Rocroi wins. What are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, another team kind of we just talked about. I know a lot of players on Benilde, Peyton, all the receivers. I went to their week 1 game, win against Wilmer. You can see the potentness of their offense once they get the chemistry going. Peyton, new quarterback there. Kind of a lot of new guys stepping in for guys that graduated from their team that went to state last year. And their schedule is not a cakewalk. They played Byron last week, who is a top 5 team in 4A. They played Rocroi, who was in the state championship game last year, maybe 2 years ago even too. No, last year for sure. Their state semis 2 years ago. So they're playing team, and then Totino Grace this week, who just beat the number 1 team, Hutchinson. So they're playing teams. Benilde's playing teams right now that's going to keep them battle tested. It's really going to test their team's togetherness. I think, like, can they get through this stretch, get to the end of the season when they do have, I think, a more favorable schedule, and they'll be more in sync, which they did. They're a multiple offense. So they do throw the ball with Peyton and the receivers that they have. And then come sections, their section is them, Holy Angels, and then a couple city schools. So I think they do have a chance to get this thing clicking, and I have seen sparks with that. It's just a lot of new guys, once again, trying to get on the same page, and they're playing against, like I said, top 5 teams every week. So it's testing them every week. It's the real deal. It's not just cakewalk opponents. So Rocroi, great. I mean, historically great program. Coach Hedberg, I don't know his last name, but he's a great defensive coach. I know working with Logan Butler a couple of years ago from Hutchinson, or last year playing them, that was always a team they circled to try to beat, just because really tough defensively, really aggressive defensively. So the fact that Benilde put up 20 points on that defense, and I think that's a good sign. So I hope they can get things figured out here later in the season too.
I'll go over just some of the games from Friday. I know Centennial played Maple Grove, and I think Maple Grove won 21-14. I think the score was that. Maple Grove has an argument to be one of the best team in 6A. Lakeville North would say that they do. Minnetonka would say that they do. It's too early to tell, and obviously we have a tournament to decide that, so that's the good thing. But one of the other teams that I'm just saying watch out for is Mounds View. They got a good quarterback. They got all the pieces of a contender, and they handled Forest Lake pretty mightily last week. I know they beat White Bear the week before that.
They lost to Farmington week 1, right?
Yeah, and Farmington's a decent team.
They can score.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what Mounds View can do going forward. That was one of my teams that was kind of on the watch for me, it kind of stuck out that, I mean, the only touchdown Forest Lake scored was at the very end of the game. So basically, they had a shutout, in a real game time, which is impressive no matter what team you're playing. All right, moving into week 4, we have one of the matchups that I want to see is Hopkins Burnsville. Not a lot of people are probably putting their eyes on this matchup, but as a lot of people know, Hopkins won their first game since 2000, however knows 2020, something like that. I'm not going to count how many games that was, but as a Forest Lakean, we had a run of 4 years of not winning a game back in it was when I was in middle school. So it was like 2015 through, or like 2014. We were like historically known as like the worst program in all of Minnesota
Really?
high school football. So I kind of know how that feels, and to get them, like, I remember Forest Lake's first win of like breaking that streak, how big it was for just like the coaches, the city, and just like the players in the program. So I can kind of resonate with that Hopkins win of just being a huge thing for everybody. And Coach Chauncey
Yeah.
just took over that program and is trying to turn it around. And I think he's doing so. And I think they got a good shot of making it 2 wins in a row. Burnsville is a winnable game for them. And that'll be interesting to just see just because, that's good for the rebuild process. And
Yeah.
that program is rebuilding. There's no other way to like sugarcoat that. They're not going to win state this year, but it's just
Right.
having a good year and building a program up to where in 3 years they're going to be in contention for it. Just because I know they have a lot of young kids on that roster. I think
Yeah, they do.
they had an 8th grader catch like a touchdown or a 2-point conversion or something last game. So that's the stuff I'm talking about, is like have a good year this year to set up for next year and the year forward. And I think Coach Chauncey's doing that with Hopkins. Going into a little bit of the other ones, we got Shakopee, Eden Prairie. Shakopee undefeated so far, 3-0 through the season. That's going to be 2 just running teams going at each other. What are you looking forward to in that one?
Yeah, running, as you pretty much said it. 2 teams running head to head in between the hashes, trying to get 3 yards of carry. I think I saw Coach Benton on Randy Shaver's podcast. He said, I think he's only beaten him one time. He's only beaten Eden Prairie one time. So he kind of talked about what I talked about too, how, people may think this is Eden Prairie's down year, blah, blah, blah. Like, Eden Prairie really, like, what's a down year to their standard? It's probably
Right.
not winning the state championship. So they're still loaded. They still
Yeah.
have dudes across the board. Shakopee's
Elijah
the same
Rump.
way. Yeah, the running back, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the running back. Yeah, and then I
Hopefully I said
see,
his last name right.
yeah, I remember watching last year against Tonka. Really good physical back, big. If he gets in space, he's gone. Like similar offenses. It's gonna be. I can see it being a low scoring game, just kind of a defensive battle, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a game to watch for sure.
Yeah, TJ Clark and Elijah Rump. If you like running backs and not a lot of passing, go to this one. It's going to be a good one, and Shakopee's battling to stay undefeated. It'll be interesting to watch that matchup play out. I'll have my eyes on that one. Stillwater Mounds View. I talked about Mounds View going into last week, just the impressive showing of beating White Bear and Forest Lake, and now going up against Stillwater, which preseason was there was rumblings just of them being state title contenders, and they got the quarterback for it in Nick Kinsey. But I was doing research on them, and they graduated a ton of their receiving core from last year. And
Mm-hmm.
I know they had some transfers come in, is what I heard from a couple people. They had, I think, at least one receiver transfer from somewhere that's a pretty good receiver. And I haven't got to
Yeah.
watch him play yet, but I think that's one of those teams that's going to turn on towards the end of the season, just because, that whole quarterback to receiver thing that gets better with time. And I know they got quite the running back, Stillwater.
Yeah,
I
for
forgot his
sure.
name,
Elijah,
but
not Elijah.
it's like Rosario something, I think.
Yeah, he ran for 220 against Woodbury. Like
Yeah.
people always talk about the passing game in Stillwater, but that I watched the Woodbury Stillwater game, and as he carried the
Matthias
load.
Rosario, something. I gotta find his name. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that one?
I I kind of look at it as a different version of North versus South. You got two very capable, talented quarterbacks. Teams. I think Samson Moundsview likes to run Jacob Sampson quite a bit because he is really athletic. Um, I think both teams, after that running back from Stillwater is kind of picking it up, they are turning into run first, but they both have the ability to spread it out and air it out. So that game will be very interesting. Once again, really good QB play between Sampson and Kinsey. Touching on your point with Kinsey and his receiver, I think it's Owen Eggy. I think he's from St. Michael, honestly. I think he moved to
Yep.
Stillwater. He's, it's just, I know Kinsey watching games, he had a really good connection with Tanner Schmidt, he's at University of Minnesota Duluth. Throwing comebacks out of his breaks, throwing dig routes before he breaks, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Like, just half the battle is, like we talked about in the first segment, like being able to have the chemistry with your receiver. Like, you trust him enough to be in this spot when there's a guy in your face. I got to throw it before he breaks. And if you don't have that, that's when you hold the ball too long, which is the difference between a first down and a sack. So I think it just takes time, and it's early in the season. It's high school football, so it just takes time to mesh with the wideouts in game situations.
Emilio Rosario Matias. Hopefully I got that
Yeah,
right. But yeah, that's the running back that has
he's good.
impressed, especially early on. Let's go to the Woodbury rivalry. We got a battle at TCO Performance Center. Woodbury and Eastridge. Eastridge got beat by Forest Lake, and I'm pretty sure it was a pretty close game. I didn't get to be at that game, but I know Eastridge has some players on their team. And Woodbury, they 2-1. They started off the season, I think, I want to say Roseville. And they battled Roseville pretty close, won 13-10, lost to Stillwater, and then bounced back against White Bear Lake 28-13 going in. So it's gonna be interesting. Those rivalry games, like we talked about, those are always just good atmospheres to be at, fun to be at, and they usually result in close games, whether one team's good, both teams are bad, both teams are good, or you just like
Right.
you never know going into rivalry games. So it's I'm definitely going to be keeping eyes on this one, Eastridge Woodbury. Just those rivalry games, they're so fun to watch. And then we got Anoka Maple Grove as the kind of last one that we're going to highlight going into it. Actually, not the last one, because we got to talk about the Elk River Andover one, which I will be at Friday. But Anoka Maple Grove, Anoka, I think, had an impressive win last week, I want to say, against Blaine.
Yep.
Right? And Blaine was coming off beating Centennial. Which, again, we talked about Centennial graduating a lot of people, but I'm pretty sure at this point we can say that they're an above average team.
Yeah.
So, Anoka coming in with the impressive win against Blaine last week, my apologies, going against a star-studded Maple Grove team. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Anoka, I've never actually watched Anoka football play, but from my understanding, Peyton Podani, they sling it. They have some good weapons. So
Yeah.
any offense like that in high school, I feel like, is going to be a little bit inconsistent. Kind of what we talked about almost all the, like kind of with Kinsey, like if they like to air it out, they're trying to work out the kinks, get on the same page. You could have a 4-play drive that spans for chunk plays, or you could have a quick 3 and out if you throw the ball a lot. So that's just kind of the nature of the spread offense. It'd be interesting to see what they do playing Maple Grove, who will, I think, take advantage of those 3 and outs and short fields with the type of the multiple run game offense that they run. It should be a really good game, though. Anoka's feeling good coming off of beating Blaine, who was ranked top 5 after beating Centennial. So, yeah, that's something to watch. I think that could help sort out where 6A stands and who stands where, and how good Maple Grove really is too. So
I think one of the things is looking at this one is if Anoka's gonna win, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be high scoring. It's gonna be a high scoring game.
yeah,
Just because Maple Grove, they're a well-oiled machine, and I think Affy Abekwe. I don't know how to it's AFY Affy or Affy Abekwe is gonna have to have a huge game, in my opinion, if Anoka wants to stay close or even win this game, which I think they have a chance doing. But can Anoka pull off that? I'm pretty sure if they win, it would be the stunner, the upset of the week, just because, you know, we had our one upset of Minnetonka in Edina last week, and I think if they could pull it off, that would be this week's upset. Any
Yeah.
more on that? Any more on that one?
No, I'm just super interested to see what happens with that one. So that'll
Yeah.
be good to watch.
And then the last one, will be Elk River Andover. This is Elk River's homecoming game. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot or two about the programs. I know Andover has that Cameron Bagel, I think, committed to the Gophers.
Bagali. Yeah.
How do you say it? So I
Bagali.
can get Bagali.
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 Yeah.
All right. We
Yeah.
got that right. Well, I got it right from now on. Bagali committed to the Gophers. We know what a talent he is. They lost their first game to St. Thomas Academy, but I think they've won. They've been undefeated since that first game. In Elk River, I think they had something ridiculous in rushing.
They're loaded.
Like average rushing yards. It was over 400, and they run the rock and they do it very well. So it's going to be interesting to see what Andover can do to kind of limit that, just because nobody has been able to find that answer to Elk River's offense so far.
Yeah. I was more in touch working with the Andover. I was more in touch with Andover last year, working with Chase, the QB last year, and then they got Elk River twice. But I do know Elk River lost either their star running back or quarterback last year, so it did slow them down, slowed down the power T a bit. But this year, it seems from the highlights I've seen and just the stats I've seen that I don't know if they've been stopped once. It seems like they're putting up 40, 50 a game running the power T, which is impressive in that offense. So they do a great job at they I feel like they were like the first team to really start the power T, and the ball fakes are insane. Like if you go to you're going to go to the game, you're going to videotape. If you're not, half the time I bet you're going to videotape, and it's going to be not on the ball because their fakes are so crazy. So it's a tough offense to stop for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I got out this summer to the Andover Elk River 7-on-7, and that's kind of when I saw Andover for the first time, kind of like, or Anoka versus Elk River, and that's kind of when I saw Anoka for the first time, seeing their weapons and kind of their air raid-ish spread offense, and that's not really Elk River's cup of tea. You're going to a 7-on-7, they got to pass and everything, but that's not really what they want to do. I know Gavin Schmidt was one of the persons that if they're going to pass it to that guy, because he catches almost anything that you throw to him. But yeah, that'll be a really good matchup to kind of look forward to as well. And I plan on being there. So, homecoming games are always wild. It'll test my videotaping skills out if I can videotape the ball.
Good luck.
But that'll wrap up the second podcast. Thank you, Quinn, once again for joining me on the second edition of the Minnesota High School Football Network podcast. Will you be back next week? We'll do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Good luck to everybody week 4. Looking forward to talking more about high school football next week.
Yeah, and once again, apologies for any names that were mispronounced. I'll be better next week. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next week.